Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Beyond Sunday podcast, where we desire to take the conversation beyond Sunday. I'm Devin, joined by my friend Shareya. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. On this episode, we're still in the generosity series, and also in the ordinary time, this long season between Pentecost and Advent. But before we dive into our conversation, we'll take a look at this video.
A biblical theology of generosity does not start with tithing or even Jesus' command to be generous to the poor. It starts before time and space with who God is. Since the beginning of Scripture, the world itself was created as an act of generous love. With God as a joyful, generous host, the world as his home, and you and I as his special guests. And from the inner nature of God, giving becomes our nature.
Okay, Shareya, as we dive in, why don't you share with us the big idea for this week, some of the scriptures we were in. Also, we can say that we were supposed to have a guest with us. Bobby Jackson brought the word at C3, and unfortunately, he could not make it for this recording. So our hope and desire and plan is that later on we'll get Bobby on the Beyond Sunday podcast, and we'll attach it to this one. He brought a powerful word this week. And so, share with us, the big idea and scriptures for this week.
Yeah, this week was all we have belongs to God. So as we're talking about generosity, and even last week the idea of contentment, that flows out of the reminder that everything that we have is God's anyways. And so we were in Luke 12. Jesus tells a parable that kind of illustrates this. I was in part of Psalm and First Timothy and Second Corinthians, actually both of the Corinthians a little bit, and so kind of all over. But really, this idea that um, the main idea of stewardship. So if everything we have belongs to God, I don't actually own any of this anyway. Uh, but God's invited me to be a caretaker or to steward well the things that He's given and the things that He's blessed me with, and so. Um, as we're talking about practicing generosity and what that looks like, that actually that at the core of it is this understanding that this is all God's anyway, and that He blesses us, or gives us things so that we can partner with Him and be generous. And so,
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I loved about this week, as Bobby shared, he took these three passages, and you mentioned, right? There's the parable of the talents, the parable of the those waiting for the Lord, right? Have a candle ready. Are you prepared? Are you ready for the bridegroom's return? And then also the rich young ruler, which we were in a couple weeks ago, or last week, and the in these three stories that Jesus is offering, and Bobby's bringing up, the sort of core to all three of those is like calling attention to what do we believe about God? And sort of the core question that Bobby was bringing up was, yeah, what do we believe about God? And in each of these stories, there's something different about what each of these believe to be true about God, and then calling attention to what is actually true about God, what we know to be true about God. And one of the things that stuck out to me in the parable of the talents is that in that question of like, what is what are the three of them who are given different amounts from the master? What did they believe to be true about the master, about God? And each one was a little different, and the what resulted was a little bit different. In fact, the piece of like the the servant who was given one talent, right, was afraid, fearful that the master would um, come back and expect a return. And so the servant buries it in the ground and then says, "Here's your return, exactly what you gave me. I didn't lose any. I didn't gain any." And Bobby made this statement of like the master essentially gave the servant uh, the master's resources, the talent, to invest it for kingdom growth based upon the ability, skill set, and influence that this servant had. And then
Right.
because of the perspective of the servant of the master, there couldn't be any movement for kingdom growth there because of that. Where the other two took what was given, um, used it, worked with it, and gained for the kingdom. So it wasn't so much the if we can hang up on the amount or the multiplication of these amounts. But for me, I was sitting in this place of like, oh, my perspective of the master matters more than even the
Yeah.
multiplication of what he's given.
Yeah, the misunderstood the character of the master. That we weren't in that parable this week, but when I when I heard that parable taught that way or called out that way a couple of years ago, that was powerful for me because I think we do get caught up often in that on the like yeah, the amounts or,
Yeah.
the like, well, why is he only given one or whatever, but the call out of like where are the places where I've misunderstood the character of the master. And that's some of what this whole thing is anyway. Like the idea that everything we have belongs to God. So first of all, that first call out does shift the perspective of like, okay, this isn't mine. This is the master's, and I've been called or invited to caretake, to steward. But then taking that a step further, what does that say about the character of this master, this
Mhm.
God who would make the world? And this was some of what I called out yesterday. God creates the entire world, and then for whatever reason, he sees fit to create humanity and invite them to be part of the caretaking of this world. Like it doesn't, these are the things that often we take for granted because it's all we know. But he didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
He didn't have to create us and say, "Hey, you're going to partner with me in this. I'm going to make you in my image in this way." Like, so all of that points to a good master and a good steward, or a good master who offers stewardship to us, and invites us to be good stewards and parts and partner with him in this. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I think that's a powerful call out.
Yeah,
Where have
because
I misunderstood the character of the master?
even what we covered last week of watch out for greed and are we content and trusting what God has given us that the um, the truth of where this sits for this week of all that we have belongs to God, right? God owns it all, and Bobby was great to offer like this is more than just resource and wealth. It is our whole
Right,
selves, right? He's created us, he's knit us together. And so everything that is us and comes from us is the Lord's. And that truth is a
right,
powerful truth. But then like so then what I do um, have in my sphere, how am I stewarding it for the Lord? Because on the other end of that is the greed piece of like, and it was, I love the definition like this greed is it tries to speak identity over us, right? You aren't enough without this thing, or if you don't have it, you are less than, right? And it speaks to identity, which we called out last week in this area, and
yeah,
in ways that money, wealth, influence, power can be an identifier. We can let it be an identifier. It can kind of glom onto us, cling onto us, or we can just even let it be the thing we wear. But it isn't really our identity
right.
if we were to mine it out or dig deeper. And I think it's an important piece too, like the building upon this, like if we aren't aware that greed or money or wealth, influence, power can be this identifier that we hold on to with like a fist or a grip, then even getting to this place that like all we have belongs to God would be a really hard leap if we're so tight-fisted with like, no,
Right.
this is what makes me me.
Which also, I mean, identities. the places we get our identity confused and mixed up also points to a misunderstanding of who the master is, because I can't fully understand my identity if I don't understand who God is, right? I'm made in his image. So
Mhm.
that's ultimately where it starts. And I feel like we say this on the podcast all the time, but like it always comes down, it seems like it always comes down to identity, whatever the conversation is. So
Yeah.
um I recognize we've been part of the conversation we've been having through this generosity practice is practicing calling out the generosity of God. Because
Mhm.
I think I shared this on the podcast maybe 2 weeks ago or whatever, but there's a conviction for me in teaching this that recognizes like actually I think the first step of generosity, if in any way I'm able to practice generosity, true generosity, like not giving out of obligation or because I want to be a good person or like philanthropy or whatever, but like if I am going any of the spaces where I'm going to actually practice this type of generosity, it's going to have to be a reflection of a God who's generous. And so the more I can call out and recognize God's generosity, the better chance I have of imitating that in my own life. And so um, we have been calling out each week, or I've been asking the question each week, and we ask this at youth group every week anyway. But where did you see God this week? Like, what are you celebrating? Let's call out the places God's been good, even if it's one small thing because you've had a hard week or whatever. And so I did call out that there were a number of things in this the few days leading up to Sunday, where I just recognized like, yeah, God, this is your goodness. And that also sits in a week where there's been heaviness and hard, and there's uncertainty and unknown, and I'm still in the middle of the wrestles. And so calling out that like even in those spaces, I can recognize God's goodness. And so and some of that too, this week we had the market on Wednesday, and so the market Wednesday night, and then a pastor gathering on Thursday, and time outside in creation on Friday and Saturday. And so those are all things that like or some of those things are things that make my soul come alive a little bit. But also recognizing like those are all examples of how this is all God's. Right.
Mhm.
So we're up on the summit on Saturday, and the mountains and the trees and river and whatever, and it's like this is all God's, and just everything in that space for me is a reminder of like um and I shared this on Sunday. I shared this with you guys on Thursday at our pastor gathering, but there's this duality when I stand in spaces of creation and the vastness of creation. So whether it's under the stars or first thing in the morning, whether it's out up on the mountains or whatever, when I stand in that space, there's a duality of like the recognition that me and my problems are actually quite small in the grand scheme of this universe and everything that God owns and holds. And at the same time, this huge, majestic God who owns all of this universe that's beyond what I can fathom. He knows me, he cares for me, he's near to me. And so there's this kind of duality in that for me, as we walk into this idea of like God does own all of this. This is all his. It's not mine. And he saw fit to entrust me with some of what he owns, to invite me in to be a caretaker and a steward. And so um yeah, there was some reflection in that, and even the like then the practical space where what's it look like to walk this out? Because what's it look like to steward this well, both in all the spaces. So finances, time, talents, whatever. What's it look like to steward those things well? And ultimately, what that comes down to, and this is kind of what we spent the second half of the message in, but ultimately that comes down to, am I listening? Am I inviting God into those decisions?
Mhm.
Because there's some suggestions or some guidelines to what it looks like to steward these things well in scripture, right? And specifically around money. But there's no hard and fast like this is what this looks like necessarily. And so what it does mean is actually, God, if this is yours and I am your steward, then I need to invite you in to tell me how you want me to use these things you've given me. And so what does it look like to invite God into how I'm stewarding my finances certainly, but also my time and also my giftings and the other resources I have. And so yeah, the idea of like, are we listening? Are we inviting to speak into these spaces and places?
Yeah. Um, this will be Bobby's story to tell, but he did share it on Sunday, is that some of his story and this last year of um, coming through, and God is inviting him, like, I'm inviting you to surrender and learning
Mhm.
what that is, what that invitation is. And so I'm excited for Bobby to share more of that, and so I'm not going to tell that for him, but there is uh, a piece there that has been um, it has given me, I don't know, hope. It has given me insight to a relationship with God as I have been in relationship with Bobby and in conversation as he has walked this out to learn what it is, and God is inviting him to surrender. That I think those are some of the things that God invites each of us to. It may not always be, surrender in this kind of way that it has been for Bobby, but maybe there is an invitation for us here of Lord, how are you inviting me to be generous with what you have been so generous with me or ways that you're inviting me or calling me to steward wisely, steward well these resources that are yours anyway, God, and um, or having eyes to see where there might be need that exists all around us, that he's uniquely placed us in those places to have an influence, to have a voice, to be the hands and feet of Jesus in those areas. So yeah, I'm if that's the tease for later on when we get Bobby on the podcast, that will be tell us some of that story of learning this invitation to surrender before God.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
So with that, Shreya, what's Kairos? What's God been saying to you from this last Sunday, and how are you responding or desiring to respond to what you're hearing from Him?
Yeah, so this is just further, it's just more echoes of what God's already been saying in the last couple of weeks. And so I called this out on Sunday, but it's this idea of noticing. I think at least for me, what I'm hearing God offer is that generosity starts with noticing, noticing first God's goodness. And so intentionally calling that out. But also noticing the places where God's inviting me to step into to join him in generosity in the
Mm,
places around me. And so, and that comes from this idea of like, God is about the kingdom work, with or without me. And that is out of his generosity, right? That the places where the kingdom's breaking through, are evidence of a God who's generous in a world that's broken and lost. And so in the places where he's inviting me to step in and to be generous, time, treasure, talent, doesn't matter. Um, I want to I want to have a practice of generosity that's intentional. And that's a separate kind of thing, but that I want to notice in any given space or moment. I want to be somebody who notices spaces where God's inviting me to step in. And that means I have to listen. Even the practical piece of that as I walk that out is like, okay, so on any given day, um, that probably needs to be the prayer. Like as I step out in this day, God, would you help me notice? Would you help me notice if there are places that you're inviting me into generosity? And so, yeah, yeah,
mhm.
noticing.
Yeah. And I would say for me, the Kairos is the question that Bobby brought up is how do I see God, or who do I believe God to be and his nature and character? I come back to this place like the the better I am at knowing, not just knowing in my head, but like it's deep within. I know this to be true about God, like this sort of David and God relationship, where in all kinds of spaces, in all kinds of ways, whether it's in the celebrations of David in the temple, or it's hiding out in the cave, running for his life from Saul, or navigating his own fallen nature and sin. I I'm caught by the like, okay, then there is further. The Kairos for me is there's further stepping into the truth and knowledge and understanding of this is who God is and who I believe him to be. And that I don't know, you see a stark contrast with the rich young ruler to the servants and the master in the parable of the talents, along with those who are waiting, the virgins who are waiting for the bridegroom to return. Some are prepared, some are ready, and some are not. So, yeah, I think just further leaning in, Lord, give me, yeah, clarity. Speak to me, my soul, let my soul settle into who you are, God. And out of that, I recognize I will carry that nature and his nature into those places. I'll reflect that kind of light, that kind of character, that kind of faithfulness and obedience. That'll be a natural outflow to that understanding. And so that's I think the Kairos for me is that understanding of who and believing of who God is, not just the knowing in the head, but the believing in my heart and soul.
Yeah. Good.
Well, guys, thanks for joining with us on this episode of Beyond Sunday podcast. We hope and pray that your conversations are going beyond Sunday, that what you're hearing and discerning and in scripture or in otherwise, you're taking it beyond Sunday and going deeper to a place where God is, you're hearing from God. He's inviting you into a closer relationship with him. So have a blessed week.